In this video, we are going to understand the difference between implicit and explicit measures in Power BI and DAX, and we are going to use the same data set we used in the last lesson. And you will also see why it is best to use explicit measures. Stay tuned and come with me. All right, let's insert two card visuals so we can compare explicit and implicit measures. And in the table, here are my data columns. And let's start inserting in this visual one of the columns. And we learned in the previous videos that whenever we want to calculate something in Power BI, either we create calculate columns here on table view, or on the report view, we should create measures. And those measures that we were creating before, those were what we call explicit measures. For example, if I want to calculate the sum of all values in the unit price columns, I'm taking the unit price columns and I want to sum up everything, every value in this column vertically. You already know well that we should create a new measure. I'm going to call it, okay, measure 1. That's okay. And I'm going to calculate the sum of the unit price column. That's it. And this is what we call an explicit measure. Basically, it's a measure that you can see on your list. And to visualize this measure, I have to drag it into a visual. In this case, it's a card visual. And then you can see the total of the unit price column. But what if I don't actually create a measure? What if I try to drag the unit price column directly into the visual, without creating any measure? And you know, the card visual, as we have seen, the card visual is able to show only one value at a time. And when I say value, it can be a number or it could be a name. For example, if I take the product name column, it's a text column. The color name column, it's a text column, and it's going to return me text. And we're going to discuss later why it's returning me this value. But whenever I refer to a value, it could be a number, a string, or a Boolean value, which means true or false, whatever value it is. Okay. And well, in this card, I was using this measure, but you know, the card only shows one value at a time. And I know that a column, a data column, the unit price column, for example, the one we are using, it had, in this case, it has 265, actually 264 values, 264 values. And how can I show 164 values from the unit price column in a visual like this, like the card visual that only is able to show one scalar value at a time? Okay, let's try. Let's just drag the entire column into the visual, and boom, you will see that the result is the very same as in a measure. And it even tells you it calculated a sum of the unit price column. And this is what we call an implicit measure. It's a measure that Power BI created automatically. It actually performs the same calculation that you would perform creating a measure manually. You can see that an implicit measure is a procedure. It's a procedure. It's not an object. The explicit measure, it's an object. And because it's an object, you can see it listed. The implicit measure, it's a procedure. You cannot see it listed here because it's just a procedure. It's a way that Power BI has to tell you, hey, this is a card visual. I can only show you one single value in this card, but since you gave me an entire column and I can't show you an entire column, okay, I won't let you down. I'll find a way to show something here. And the best I can do is just to summarize this column. And in this case, by default, I'm using a sum, and I'm going to summarize this data, and I'm going to give you the total sum, which matches all the needs. At the same time, I'm using the entire column, but I'm only showing a scalar value, and this was only possible because I aggregated this column with the sum. Hey, a lot of people learn from my videos, but end up forgetting to like and subscribe to the channel. Hitting that like button, subscribing, and leaving a comment really helps YouTube recommend this content to more people, and it lets me know what's working for you. If you'd like to support this project, consider getting the companion datasets for a symbolic price. It's a great way to follow along with the lessons and reinforce your practical skills at the same time. The links are in the description. And let me know in the comments what topics you'd like to see next. I'm always open to new ideas. And you may think, okay, but what if this measure, instead of a sum, what if I want an average? And I'll calculate the average, and that's very easy. With an implicit measure, all I have to do is open my visual pane, and instead of a sum, I can click this little arrow, and it gives me the chance. It gives me the chance to change the operation that I'm using in the aggregation. Aggregation or summarization is the same thing. So instead of a sum, now I want an average. And there you go. What if the measure now is going to be the median value in the unit price column? Okay, an implicit measure can do the same, only I change and select the median. There you go. And as you can see, I can automatically change the operation. I have a sum, an average, minimum or maximum, count, distinct, count, standard deviation, variance, and median. So it's so easy when you're using implicit measures. In this case, let me, for example, use the minimum value, and it's the same if in the explicit measure I use the min function, okay? Does it work with text too? Yeah, it works with text. Only it works, the logic is different. And we saw in the last video that aggregation, when we're working with text, aggregation is more limited. And pretty much when we're aggregating text, we are left with the min or max operations and count or count distinct. We cannot, of course, run any sum or average when we're working with text, and we explained that in detail in the last video. And okay, let's change instead of in the measure, instead of, let me use a sum again, but now instead of unit price, I want the color name. And of course, as we tried in the last video, you will see that it doesn't work because it doesn't make sense to sum text. But we can, for example, use the min function to calculate the first text in an alphabetical order, and black will be the first color we have in our color list if we order it according to an alphabetical order. And if instead I use the max function, it's going to give me the last word, the last text in the alphabetical order. And if I change the implicit measure and drag the color name column into the visual with no measure calculated, it's going to give me black. It's give me the first one. It's like by default, it's like it's using the main function. In this case, you can see that I have the same choices, but I can change it. In the implicit measure, I can change. The first would be equivalent to the main function. It's giving me the first value in the alphabetical order. I could choose the last one. In this case, is yellow, is the same as if I was using the max function in the explicit measure. You can see it's the same value. And we could also use other ways to summarize. Only we are limited to first, last, count, and count distinct, as we saw in last video, because we're dealing with text. And now you may be thinking, okay, so I'm not going to use explicit measures anymore because implicit measures, they are so much easier. Power BI will run all the calculations for me. All I have to do is select what calculation I want and the drop-down list, and that makes my life easier. And it doesn't even clutter my list of columns and objects on the right-hand side of my screen. So yeah, I'm going to keep using implicit measures. And I will tell you that this is a horrible idea. Please don't do it. The best practice is always work with explicit measures. And I'm going to give you a good example of that. Suppose, well, I have the unit cost and the unit price, okay? And suppose I want to calculate the percentage of the cost compared to the unit price. And to do it, I would have to calculate I would have to divide the unit cost by the unit price, so I would have how how many percent the unit cost represents of the unit price. And of course, I can do it right here. I would have to create a new column. Let me create a calculated column, and this is going to be the percentage. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to, from the products table, I'm going to divide unit cost by, I'm going to divide unit cost by product unit price. And there you go. Now I only have to format this column as percentage. Now it looks better. And now let's do what we were doing using implicit measures. So in the card, instead of using the unit cost or anything, I'm going to use the new column that is the percentage column that I just created. And there you go. It's totally, absolutely wrong. That's not what I wanted. And maybe if I change the sum or the average or the minimum or maximum, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. The correct measure, the correct value would be this. I would have to create a new measure. Let me use this measure. Or just adjust it. And measure 1, I'm going to sum up everything from the unit cost column. Okay, measure 1. Now I'm going to create measure 2. It's going to be the sum of everything in the unit price column. There you go. And now I'm going to create measure 3, and I'm going to call it percent. I'm going to call it percent because I already have an object called percentage, which is the calculated column's name. If I use percentage again, it will return me an error. And pretty much what I would like to do here, I will open the brackets to find measure 1 and divide it by measure 2. And it's going to return me an error because I cannot have two objects with the same name. So I'm going to change it and just leave it as percent. There you go. And now I am going to change in this card. I'm going to use the percent measure and format it as percentage. And there you go. This is the right value. Okay, percent. And of course, I didn't have to create measure 1, measure 2, or 3. I'll just delete this one, delete it, and delete this one. And I could do it all in this measure. I just have to make a sum of unit cost divided by the sum of unit price would be the same. Now I will bring it into the visual, measure 1, and again as a percentage. Okay, that's right. So you can see that implicit measures could be very problematic. And also, as you cannot see your implicit measures listed on your data panel, you cannot reuse it. We just saw an example in which I created 2 measures, measure 1, measure 2, and combined them to create measure 3. So whenever you can see your objects right here, you can reuse them, and you can do it with explicit measures. You cannot do it with implicit measures. And implicit measures, when you start working in more advanced, more complex, more complete dashboards, implicit measures won't be able to give you what you need. So the best practice is, although you have a little more work because you have to actually manually create the explicit measures, they are the best way and safest way to work. I hope you liked this video. If you did, again, please don't forget to hit that like button. We really need your help so we can grow and reach more people and get motivated to keep teaching you Power BI, Power Query, Excel, and a lot of other subjects that we have to share with you as we progress. See you in the next lesson.